Tubers and trolls, welcome back to Troll Nation. I'm Chris with Telesplash Gaming, and today I want to go over a few games that were great, got good reviews, but nobody bought them. I mean, I'm guilty of it. I didn't buy these games when they came out. I read the reviews, I knew they were good, but for some reason, my wallet went a different direction. And that's kind of the case with a lot of these. They become cult classics, but at the initial release, they just didn't do well. I think we know most of them. We may have played some of them, but at the end of the day, most of us probably didn't buy them when they came out. So let's take a look at this list and get started. First up on the list is Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning. Now this was released in 2012 for almost every platform except Nintendo. It's an action role-playing game featuring 5 regions, 4 playable races, 3 class trees, and then there's 22 abilities per tree, so the game was ambitious to say the least. And the founder himself of 38 Studios said he wanted to create a mixture of God of War and Elder Scrolls. And frankly, he did that. People loved the gameplay, and the story was good. Almost everything about this game was praised. IGN gave it a 9 out of 10. Metacritic has it at 81%. So overall, the game was great. The problem was it had a very, very high production and development budget. To break even, they needed to make 3 million sales. They needed to sell 3 million copies of the game. And unfortunately, it only sold 1.2 million. Which just wasn't going to cut it. So with that being said, 38 Studios made one game, Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning, and then filed bankruptcy. So it's really unfortunate because if they make a game this good, it would have been nice to see what they had in store, down the road. And unfortunately, since there was a poor sales, they had to hit the road and call it a day. Next up is a game that I feel like everybody's heard of. I know I have, but I can't say I've invested a lot of time in it, and that's Beyond Good and Evil. Now, this was distributed for every platform at the time in 2003 and even made it to the PS3 and the 360. So it wasn't like it didn't have a chance. One of the biggest problems is that Ubisoft did not do a fantastic job marketing it. So even though this game got great reviews, it had stealth elements, it had puzzle solving, kind of like an action, platformer. It had all the great things you need to be a good game, except nobody knew about it. And at the end of the day, that kind of falls on Ubisoft's, lap a little bit, but it also falls on gamers. At the time, a lot of gamers were wanting those big budget titles. They were all over TV. They saw the internet was all over the place with their games coming out, and really Ubisoft did not market Beyond Good and Evil. So people who played it absolutely loved it. And it was an award-winning game for its character creation, its audio, its story. And since then, it's made greatest of all time lists on tons of different websites and news articles, but at the time, it just didn't sell well. But if you're a fan of Beyond Good and Evil, the good news is they're making a sequel, just got announced, so it hasn't died, it just didn't do well in the beginning, but it's picking up momentum, it's become a cult classic, and if I had to bet money on it, I bet the sequel is going to sell a ton of copies. The next game up on the list is one that pains me a little bit because I love it, and that's Max Payne 2, The Fall of Max Payne. Now, I invested a lot more time in the first game, which apparently I wasn't the only one, because Max Payne 2 sold terribly. But Max Payne 1, when it came out, had that Matrix bullet time effect with the slow motion. That was so cool, and I loved playing it. But the sequel came out, and it's almost like everybody got their fix from the first game, and even though number 2 did everything better, except it had an incredibly short storyline, that was the only major complaint, was that it was such a short game, it did everything better, yet nobody bought it. And like many on this list, it sold poorly, it won a ton of awards, but gamers are kind of finicky, and like I said, maybe the original was enough to kind of satiate that hunger for bullet time, and they're ready to move on. Although there has been a Max Payne 3, so the game is still out there, it just didn't sell well. The next one up, I'm guilty as anybody, and it's Shenmue II. It was originally released strictly in Europe and Japan, but was eventually ported in 2002 to the Xbox. So there was some distribution problems in the beginning, at least for fans in North America, but it did come to the Xbox. But what happened is, like many again on this list, it just didn't sell. It sold 100,000 copies after 2 years. That's a tenth of the original title. And Shenmue II is one of the best games ever. It's easily one of the greatest Dreamcast games ever made, but it just didn't sell. Now, fortunately, with the HD remakes for PS4 and Xbox One, you can play the games with a little better graphics on your current system, so that's cool. And what it does, it follows the martial artist Ryo Hazuki, who is continuing his journey of revenge, which started in the original game, which was the death of his father by a rival martial artist, or maybe he was a gang member. I don't know exactly. I didn't want to spoil the plot details for myself because I want to play the game. But it does have 3D fighting similar to Virtua Fighter with day and night system kind of incorporated into it. So things change. NPCs are all over so you can interact with them and ask them questions and kind of get clues as to, where the assailant is so you can follow them. And, for a while, Shenmue III was done. It was in development hell. Fans kind of thought that Shenmue II was the end of the road, even though the saga had not actually finished. The story was left open for a sequel. But fortunately, the creator and many fans had a Kickstarter that had enough money to fund it, and now we're actually going to get Shenmue III. So that's cool. I can't wait to play 1 and 2. I own it. It's time for me to put it in. It's a bucket list game for the next few months for me. Moving on to a PS2 exclusive, and that's Godhand. Now, of all the games on this list, I think Godhand is the one that probably got the least favorable reviews, but it was also the most polarizing. It was the one where people just couldn't put it down, and I'll get to that in a minute. But basically, it is a mixture of Eastern and Western comedy with some over-the-top storyline, outrageous characters, and I think kind of gamers and fans were confused as to who this game was really for when it was released. You're playing as a martial artist, and you have this pair of basically gloves called Godhands, and you are there to protect your friends and fight off demons with these gloves. So kind of an interesting, dynamic, and the gloves have these powers so you can actually, fight against these demons, make it a fair fight, I guess you could say. But it didn't get amazing reviews, but many people liked its old school beat 'em up style, but it missed the boat on basic gameplay elements like camera design. The controls weren't fantastic. And then over the years, it's kind of funny. It's like it got terrible reviews, and then over the years, people have changed their mind. It's kind of like Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. At the time, people hated it because it was too cartoony. They wanted something more realistic. And then going back, it's the only Zelda title that actually held up in that era. So Godhand was given a 3 out of 10 by IGN at the time. But recently, when IGN did their top 100 games on the PS2, Godhand was on the list. It was number 100, so it wasn't great. But out of how many 1,400 PS2 games or whatever it is, it still made the top 100 list. So it gave it a 3 out of 10, and now they love it. And then the best quote I can get is this one. It's from the PlayStation Magazine. They sum it up best. It says, "Godhand is a terrible, terrible game, yet I can't stop playing it. There's just something horrifically appealing about how bad it is in almost every conceivable way." So it's kind of one of those games you love to hate, where it's not fantastic, but for some reason people seem to like it. Next up is Vampire Masquerade. Now this game was released in 2004, and just to get this out of the way, it sold 80,000 copies during its initial run. 80,000 copies is not good. But here's the thing. It's one of the best vampire games ever made. Now, I know Castlevania is probably the greatest, but we're talking about playing as a true vampire. You don't get too many games like that. Now, there is one that came out recently that was pretty good, and I don't know how it compares to this, but at the time, nobody bought this game, but it's become a huge cult classic. Now, what you are finding yourself as in this game is a newly created vampire. Now, you have to choose between 7 different vampire factions, and you join one of them, and then your story kind of begins. And you have to learn how to live your new life as a blood-sucking, night-roaming, sunscreen-loving Dracula wannabe with the mean streets of Los Angeles as your backdrop. So that alone is just a cool way of putting it. I mean, you'd be a vampire in Los Angeles? But there's branching storylines, character building trees, and then a humanity meter, which kind of shows how feral you're getting, how much closer to the full vamp instead of full human. So that's kind of a cool thing too. But again, like I said, it didn't sell well. And like many games on the list, it's become a cult classic because it's so good, but nobody bought it. So with that being said, I'm sure you can find it on the cheap. It's really a PC exclusive. So check it out. I don't know if you can find it on Steam or where it's at, but Vampire Masquerade, check it out. Killer 7 is the next game on this list. Now, it's a 2005 release for GameCube and PS2, and at the time, it was just another action-adventure game where you play as 7 different assassins who at one time were actually all alive, but have died, and their souls were absorbed by a wheelchaired man named Harmon Smith. That alone is unique. But then you look at the cel-shaded graphics, and they're still unique to this day. I mean, we don't see a lot of cel-shaded games. And this was one of the originals. I mean, there's a few others, but it was a really neat game. But again, it didn't take off. Now, one thing about the gameplay is it's extremely linear. And the graphics and art style are so unique that I think a lot of gamers at the time were kind of turned off by the linear gameplay. It's a first and kind of third person shooter elements, but it has an on-rail shooter type of vibe where you can't really branch off and do your own thing. But in today's day and age, when everything's open world, it's kind of a nice change. And you basically can switch between these different assassins freely. You go through the pause menu, you can switch to a new assassin in order to solve puzzles. So each assassin kind of has their own unique traits, and there's different puzzles you have to solve using a certain assassin. And that's how you kind of progress through the game. And, you know, with an edgy plot, anime-style cutscenes, and a very, very unique gameplay experience, this game wasn't for everyone. But a lot of people enjoyed it, and it received really good reviews, and it even won an award that year for the GameCube for Best Game Nobody Played. So if you want to find something unique with unique graphics, anime-style cutscenes, cool gameplay, and a kind of plethora of assassins, Killer 7 might be the one for you. Closing out this list today is Psychonauts, released on the PS2 and the Xbox, as well as the PC in 2005. Now, this is one, again, I am guilty of not investing time into. I know about it, I've heard about it, I've read about it, yet I couldn't tell you much about it. You basically start out as a young boy named Raz who has psychic abilities, and you're in the circus. And you escape from the circus, and you go to a summer camp to learn to be trained as a spy with psychic abilities, hence the name Psychonaut. But while you're at the camp, you uncover a much more ominous plot going on, and you begin your journey of solving this mystery. Now, this game uses kind of various psychic abilities that you can upgrade. It's got puzzle solving involved with it, and despite being highly praised again and winning multiple awards, the game was a complete commercial failure and sold fewer than 100,000 copies in North America. But there is a light at the end of Psychonauts' tunnel. It has gone on to sell over 1 million copies due to the Steam release, which sold a ton on its own, and various releases on other consoles. So Psychonauts is one that's got some sequels that have come out as well, but its initial release was like everything in this list. It just wasn't bought by the fans and the gamers, and it's become a cult classic, and it's a great game. So if you want to check out something different, with a little bit of that psychic abilities, check out Psychonauts. Alright guys, that's 8 games that nobody bought or played. I hope you guys enjoyed the list. I hope there was a few on there that surprised you. In the comments below, let me know what games that you guys loved that nobody bought, nobody played, received very little fanfare, and sold terribly. I love finding these. They're kind of like the hidden gems. And you know what? There's going to be other lists like this because there were so many games as I was doing research that really didn't sell well that got great reviews. So this will probably be just part 1 of many. With that being said, keep rolling, keep trolling. Thanks for your guys' support, and we'll talk to you soon.